I took a stroll downtown this evening when I heard music echo through the night. So I started running so I wouldn't be too late. In the neon light, what the music could reveal through the night.
Welcome everyone to Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden, and I'll be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about communication, confidence, and the whole realm of how to be effective in the art of human-to-human interaction. Now, communication is one of those things that you might think that one episode is going to be good enough. And I have brought on communication coaches, public speaking coaches, but we can never get enough of communication assistance. And that is because time is changing, technology is evolving, and we need to understand that how we communicate is going to be different. We have to get into a different way of thinking. Is how I'm communicating effective today? Because how communication was 50 years ago might not be how we communicate today. And look, we send emails today. We don't really do much letters, handwritten letters. So we can see that communication has already changed. But is it changing for the better? Well, maybe, maybe not. Now, we do talk about that in the episode today with my guest, Robert Kennedy III. And we dive deep into communication, the nuclear family type of system, where we're taking a look at family, how parents can communicate effectively with their children, and how can people be more effective communicators in the outside world. And there's one key similarity in all of the areas: confidence. Are you confident in communication? Are you confident with speaking to other people? Can you just go up to a stranger and have a full-blown conversation and understand that you're going to be okay? Maybe, maybe not. But if it's maybe not, then of course you're going to want to watch this episode. And if it's maybe, stay tuned for more information, because we're going to be talking about some things that we never talked before about on Coaching in Session. So here's that interview with Robert Kennedy III and myself.
Yeah, I'm watching the rise, and I wouldn't say I'm shocked because I'm hardly surprised. This one's for the ride, this one's for who knew I'd make it, just needed some time.
Welcome, Robert Kennedy III, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Michael. Great to be here. Do me a favor, my friend.
Yeah.
I am a speaker, and when I enter a room, I like to do it a little bit differently. So do me a favor. Just say, ladies and gentlemen, introducing Robert Kennedy III.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Robert Kennedy III.
Yeah. Yes. I'm here. We're in the room. I just like to bring my own theme music. Can you imagine like walking into a room and having like a band with you?
I mean, that's probably going to be annoying after some time, especially like if you go into like a funeral home.
Well, listen, they're going to remember you.
Yeah.
At the funeral home.
Yeah, it's one way to build a legacy is by doing that. So I have you on today. You are a communications coach. You deal primarily with confidence, but communication is more than just that. In your own words, can you tell the world who you are and what you do?
Oh, man, my name is Robert Kennedy III. RK3 is what the cool people call me. I am a communication coach, as Michael just mentioned. I run a training company, Kinetic Communications. I've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years. I've been in the speaking industry officially for about 5 years or so, but my communication background goes as far back as, my gosh, when I was in the classroom teaching biology and physics, physical science as a teacher, as a high school teacher back in the day. So I've been in this talking to people, teaching people space for quite some time.
What was the transition like for you going from teaching to communication and working with people and being that public speaking figure?
Yeah, well, it was a good transition. I don't know if it was just kind of this intentional, okay, I'm going to go over there moment, Michael. It was kind of a sequence of things. I think I've been an entrepreneur at heart for a very long time. So even when I was in teaching or when I was in corporate, I didn't fit, right? There are some things that caused me to not do as well as I wanted to in those spaces. And I always knew that there was something that I needed to be doing where I could call the shots differently. So, at some point there was one specific moment where I moved my family about 500 miles away from where we were, and about 10 days after we moved from the state of Massachusetts to Maryland, I lost my job as an online faculty. And
Mm.
so I had to figure some things out because I wasn't getting any callbacks, I wasn't getting any interviews, and so I had to figure out how to contribute and support my family. And so that's where my first real experience with 100% entrepreneurship came about. And so my speaking and training has kind of grown from that space.
And would you go back to being an educator in the public school system?
No.
Easy, easy. Same with me. Same with me. I mean, I am a former educator myself, taught in public schools, and I wouldn't go back now. If I do go back, it's going to be in the realm of my business. And I'm sure similar to you, right? You would go back and you would teach children how to be confident, how to communicate effectively, more deeply. Same thing with me. I would go back, teach them mindset, mindfulness, awareness, finding their purpose, passion, gift, all of that, right? But it's not so much of me being a teacher in the school system. For me, it feels like you're almost shackled. You're like handcuffed. You can't have the freedom that you would like. And, just from sensing your energy, it seems like you're going to be muffled in that school system.
Oh yeah, I was because I taught physics, right? I believe that when you teach things like physics, where there are formulas and things that are connected to real life, instead of just teaching the theoretical piece of it, I've got to teach the kids physically how it works. I got to give them some examples. So I was the classroom that had the kids in the hallway. We were measuring out spots and doing races in the hallways. We're running vehicles or little remote control cars up and down the hallway. And so pretty much when my classroom started, when my days of my classes started, you could hear the other teachers' doors close in unison, like Mr. Kennedy's in the hall.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. There was some measure of shackling or just being imprisoned or enclosed that I did feel in the classroom.
They've kind of taken that away from like the old school way of teaching where teachers have more reign to teach how they want to. And now it's more curriculum and assessment type of teaching. And this is not how children learn effectively. It's making them more stressed. It's making them more concerned with what a grade is to them rather than them figuring out, well, what would I like to do in life? And then not having the teacher say, well, your circumstances doesn't allow that. And I mean, just in my teaching career alone and all my coaching, I can see people going up to young minds and saying, yeah, that's not for you, right? So they're basically telling someone else that their dream is not approachable or is the correct dream. And I find that to be far from the truth. If a young mind wants to go for something, we have to be the people that encourage them and say, hey, let's go get that. And that kind of goes into confidence, and why I have you on is because those young minds that are growing up, they want to be confident in their dream. But when they have an adult kind of saying, yeah, this dream is not for you, you'll never be able to achieve that, their confidence kind of hits rock bottom, and some recover, some don't. But if we can, let's talk about that type of confidence and that type of building up of the young minds and then going from there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that I've learned over time is my definition of confidence has changed a little bit. I remember being young, going to high school, and there was this guy that I was a little bit jealous of him. Every time he would walk into a room, people would just be attracted or just magnetized to this guy. And it felt like he had this special charisma. There was just something special about him. And people referred to him as being confident. And so I kind of thought that, okay, there's this gene that some people have. Some people have this confidence gene and other people don't have it.
Mhm.
And what I learned over time that is that confidence, and my definition of confidence, is repetition with the expectation of success, right? So the more that you do something, the more confident you become in that thing, right?
Mhm.
My daughter learned how to drive a couple of years ago. And when we first started with her driving lessons, she was like, let me look in this mirror and then that mirror and then make sure all my dials are set, and then she literally had to think through everything. Nowadays she like zooms out of the cul-de-sac and we're like, dude, slow down, so she's not thinking about all those different things because now she's repeated some things enough and she's confident in that behavior. So I think one of the things that we may miss in the school systems or even in the corporate setting is really, number one, clarifying what it is that people need to be able to do effectively, clarifying what's the end game, what's the goal, and then allowing people to repeat little pieces of success, if you will, so that they can then become and show up in a more confident way every day.
For me, the feeling of confidence comes after the action. So we
Yes.
have to first do the act, and we're not going to be confident initially. So
Yep.
we're doing something we're not confident in. If you do it enough, you become confident. Similar
Yes.
to how if you're getting into public speaking, you might
Yep.
be not in the realm or the mindset of public speaking. You see everything about public speaking as being negative. I'm going to go up stage and I'm going to mess up. I'm not confident. I'm not like RK the third. I'm not him. And then they're comparing themselves because they see that you're such an eloquent speaker, and they compare themselves to you. And they're like, I'm only a fraction or a margin of what that was. But they
Right.
don't put themselves into your shoes because maybe at one point you had to learn how to be that type of exuberant type of speaker and communicator. It takes time. And even when I was a teacher, in the beginning, I was a little bit more timid, but then it was
Mhm.
kind of like a walk in the park. The more I did it, the more I became confident. It was just another day when I would go in the classroom. In the beginning, I'm going to be thinking like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Are they going to listen? Are they going to have fun? All these different thoughts are going on in my head until it's like, I'm the teacher. Let's make this happen. And we made it
Yeah.
happen. And then I can see that they are having a good time. And I took away all that self doubt. I took away all of that negative way of thinking. You just said, I'm a confident teacher. I have already the skills needed to be an effective teacher. So let's just teach and do what I'm supposed to do every single day. And I find that people get into that self doubt so quickly where they're so worried about failure that they can't even be confident.
Right. Well, I mean, I think a piece of that also is if we go back a second to what you said originally is taking action. So the first piece of confidence is courage, right? You've got to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone. Everything that you want to accomplish is beyond your comfort zone, right? And so when we think about public speaking as the example, there are some feelings that are associated with public speaking. There's some mental cages, or there's some mental fences that you've got to jump in order to get to a certain spot. And a lot of people have this nervousness associated with public speaking. They're like, oh my gosh, Robert's on the stage, or I've got to be on the stage. I got to speak after Robert, or I've got to speak, at some point. And they associate that, okay, if I go up there, that means I'm kind of by myself. There's nobody around me. Everybody else is on the stage, on the chair in front, looking for me to fail, looking for me to mess up so they can point their fingers and criticize me. And that's really not the story. So we create stories in our brains, in our minds, based on, sometimes made up things that we've heard or that we felt, and we assign those stories as true, and they're not really true. And so one of the things that I share with my public speaking coaching clients, they come to me and say, Robert, hey, how can I get rid of nervousness before I speak? And I say, well, our job really is not to get rid of the butterflies. It's to help them fly in formation, right? Because the adrenaline, the emotions, the hormones, that stuff is still going to be there. You've just got to figure out how to be aware, recognize the emotion, recognize the feeling, and then cause it to do what you want it to do.
When you were talking, I was just thinking about like I would have clients sometime they would come to me and they might need relationship coaching. So we talk
Yeah.
about the mindset of relationship coaching. And I say, well, let's find a girl and let's go talk to them. Right.
Right.
And they're like, I'm not you. I can't do that. I'm not confident. And they have all these reasons in their head of why they can't talk to the girl. And I remember sometimes for local people, because I work with people online too, so they might not be close by. So I can't do this with them. But if they are a local resident, we're able to go out to a bar, restaurant, something like that. And I just asked them, I said, which girl do you fancy? And then I'll go
Right.
talk to them and I'll just say, hey, I just want to introduce to my friend. The only thing we're looking for is conversation. Typically, the girls are like, sure thing. I tell him come like after like 2 to 5 minutes, depending on how he's feeling. He comes over reluctantly, and then he's able to have a conversation with the person he's so afraid of, right? And
Right.
at the end of a conversation, sometimes the numbers get exchanged, sometimes they don't. It's not a problem. We're just having a conversation. That's why I tell them in the beginning, we're not expecting a number. We're not expecting a date. We're just going to have a conversation. And the more we do that, the more they're like, next time I'm going to ask her for the number. So it's like a compounding effect where in the beginning, they're so afraid to go talk to someone. And then when they are talking to them, they're like, it's not so bad. It's people being people, right? People have forgot that communication is communication. And I'm not sure if it's so much about maybe cell phones technology has taken that kind of away from us to be in good communication with the humankind, in direct contact with them. It's because it's so easy to send a text message. It's so easy to write an email rather than spending some time with someone in person, getting to know them, and then having a conversation, whether it be good, bad, or if you agree to disagree.
Yeah. Well, I think the cell phones I don't know if it's taken it away. It definitely has introduced another layer because ultimately we're scared of pain. We don't like pain. And so we do everything that we can do to not introduce pain or discomfort. Right. I mean, and the truth is, I think, as I just mentioned, with regard to creating these big stories in our minds, it's like the little kid, right? When the kid they're like, oh, mom, I saw the boogie monster. Right. And they see a shadow or there's a tree branch outside of their room that they see the shadow from the tree branch in their room. And that they're like, oh, my gosh, they concoct this huge story in their minds over something that is just a tree branch waving in the wind. Right? Or you think about going to the doctor to get an injection. It's like this little needle. And yet we freak out, or there are people that freak out because I don't want to be stuck by this needle. They're thinking this little needle is going to cause this huge pain. Right. And so when we think about this from a communication perspective, a lot of people, I know people that are like, yeah, let me just send the text because I don't want to have the continued conversation. Because I don't want to have the response. I don't want to have to defend myself. I don't want to have to be wrong. Ooh, I don't want to have to be, I don't want to have to navigate any sort of conflict here. So yeah, cell phone shorthand language has definitely introduced another layer, but it's all still based on people trying to navigate or move past hurt. We don't like pain or discomfort. So we're trying to avoid it at all costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's just a condition of developing habits and routine, similar to how if you go to the gym, you might not like going to the gym the first week, the first month, even because every week you're coming home and you're just sore, miserable. When you're on the treadmill, you're just huffing and puffing and you're like, this sucks. Now, there is a bright side to the story. If you keep going, that treadmill becomes easier. Going to the gym becomes easier. And then it's going to be maintenance, basically. At that point, I don't go to the gym and feel like I'm about to die every single day I'm in the gym. I go to the gym 5 days out of the week. I would say I push myself to extreme probably 2 out of those 5 days. And that's just because on 2 of the 5 days, I'm probably doing some type of intense cardio. But for me, it's natural. My heart will elevate, but my mind is not like, oh my God, what's happening? My body has done it so many times already. Whereas yep, it's just another Tuesday and it just keeps moving. When we get that fight or flight type of response, the body doesn't know if we're in real danger or if we're in a pretend danger, because public speaking, communicating with others, that's pretend danger. Now, of course, someone might hurt your feelings. Yeah, they might not like what you said, but at the end of the day, it's like we have to learn how to be cordial again, too. And that's communication, where let's say if Robert and I have a disagreement, I'm almost 100% certain that him and I can talk it out. And even if at the end of our conversation, him and I say, you know what, we just have different viewpoints, but I do see your viewpoint and I respect it and I understand it. Versus, all right, you have a different viewpoint than me. I'm going to unfollow you. I'm going to unfriend you. I'm going to write you a negative review on Google because Lord knows that I have to be right. Right. So we're getting into that world of confidence is not so much of me feeling secure in who I am, is me being secure in that I am right. I am following my truths or my belief. People have gotten so entwined in their value system where they are now blind and they can't see the rest of the world, where they're just looking at their situation. The world is a big place and not everyone is going to have what you have. A little bit is society, but then a little bit is people don't take the time to learn these skills of communication. and confidence. So when we get to that point where someone doesn't have those skills, what are the first steps that we can take or that you can take as a communications coach to help them understand that communication is more than just talking or a text message?
Well, communication, the biggest piece of communication is listening, right? One of the things that I share when when people are asking for help about going on stage or public speaking, and they say, "How do I open my speech? How do I open my talk?" And I say, one of the best things that you can do, right? For those of you that are listening to Michael's podcast right now, get ready, get ready. I'm just about to share the secret with you. I'm about to share a cheat code with you, right? You want to gain people's trust, you want to gain their attention, you want to engage them immediately. One of the best ways to do that is to ask a question, right? Because if you ask a question from a scientific perspective, our minds, there's a trigger in our minds in our brains called instinctive elaboration. And that simply means that we can't help but answer a question, right? When a question is asked, our minds literally begin searching through its Rolodex or a database of experiences. Did I experience that? Do I want to experience that? Do I not want to experience that anymore? And so we're trying to form connections because that's what we want to do naturally, right? And so if I'm a speaker, I ask questions to create connection with people. As a communicator, if it's just conversation, how do you get to know people better? How do you find out a bit more about their perspective? How do you understand what drives them, what they believe in, what are their values? You do that not by arguing with them or forcing your viewpoint down their throat. You ask questions to find out where they're coming from and what they think. And then when they're ready to answer, you shut up and you listen and you get clues from that, because that is where you begin to form connection and create trust. But that happens only if you are willing to shut down your need to be right for a moment and then just be open to hearing the different views or the different vantage points of people in the world, man. So yeah, we've got to listen. That's a big piece.
Yeah, no, listening is very important, and it is a skill that many people need some work on. And one of the best ways that you can actually enhance your listening skills is podcasts like this, where you don't have the chance to speak to us. You can't press pause and say, "All right, Michael, all right, Robert," and then talk to us. We're not going to hear you, right? If you're talking to yourself, have fun. But at the same time, the conversation that we are having, Robert and I are having, has already passed. So you can learn from our conversation. You can listen. And then once you get that knowledge or all of that wisdom that we're going to be talking about in this episode, then you can start to come to your own conclusions in your mind. And then you can ask questions to other people around you. "Hey, I listened to this podcast. Do you believe that listening is one of the most important parts of communication?" Now they're thinking like, that's a good question. Yes, it is, right? Being able to listen to someone. And then he's getting a first world experience of, my mom just said this, my dad, my grandma, whoever they asked. Listening is so important. And it's very important in relationships, because if you don't listen, they're going to find someone who does listen, right? Because because we have to understand that we all have needs. We all have our basic needs, but communication is one of those needs that many people kind of don't pay too much attention to. There has been studies where people would go in isolation for a week, 2 weeks time, and after 3 or 4 days, they're going stir crazy. Yes, they're able to have books, they're able to have games, but they're not able to talk to anyone on the outside world. So if it's a video game, there's no like online player. Or if you're on your phone, you can't text someone. You're literally doing everything by yourself outside communication. Humans need that human other bond, where it's like, if we're not conversating with people or if we're not listening to other people, we start to kind of go crazy because we're just there with our own thoughts. Many people enjoy listening to podcasts, not because they're filled with so much wisdom and it's going to help propel you into a better place in your life. Yes, that's a plus. But at the same time, you're listening to people and you're getting that kind of like that communication with people indirectly, rather than, okay, I'm going to go talk to my friend after work today and we're going to have a conversation. You can have it on the way to work, on the way home, and you can start that thinking process from other people, hearing other people's voices and then resonating with them and then building a bond of community, basically, is what podcasting is, building a community where we bring you along for the ride. And of course, you can email us and you can talk to us, but at the same time, it's kind of like your own personal space where you get to understand what we spoke about and then bring it back to your own beliefs, your own value system, and then go from there.
Yeah, that's so super important. And I'm glad you talked about community and its relationship to communication. And if we go Latin for a second, you can kind of see the basis of the two words is the same, really that connection to each other. And so that involves not just this one way thing. It's not monologue. It's not one direction. It involves intention and perception, both ways. It involves at least two parties, multiple parties. And the reason that's super important is because in order for us to accomplish anything, in order for us to do anything together, we've got to create some bonds. We've got to create links of trust in some way. And so that happens by connecting, that happens by understanding where people are and, understanding the speed that we can go at based on different skills and perspectives, where people are standing in the world, experiences, the challenges that they've had. So we've got to figure those things out. And again, the best way to do that is by asking questions, listening, and then being willing and courageous enough to share perspectives.
Mm-hmm. And we all have a different upbringing. I know for me, I grew up with parents, grandmothers, and we communicated here and there. And eventually it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to go out with my friends and ride my bike around the neighborhood. And so we had that type of upbringing where it was very community based. Nowadays, and I mean, we can look at the quarantine, the lockdowns to kind of being a different way of life where we kind of took that aspect away from children, where it's like everything is going to be online now. They did online learning for a year and a half. They are now basically staying home most of the time, and they're doing like they have Xbox Live and all of these things that they can have entertainment in the home where they don't necessarily need to go out and have that bond of that neighbor kid next door and go to the park together or ride the bike together. And it's very rare that I see that here in Texas. But when I was younger, it was so prominent where people would go out and form those bonds. Now it's kind of like we have shied away from it. And again, I mean, I'm sure a little bit is to blame with the quarantines and lockdowns, and it kind of put people into a different perspective because, I mean, that, this is a rabbit hole type of question. But just to ask you a specific question, do you think in our future we're going to be able to get back to that communication, that type of building with young people, going out, meeting people on the streets, playing in the park until the lights come on and getting away from the TVs, the Xbox, and their cell phones?
I'm always wary of any question that is like getting back to, because as much as we would like it to, I mean, history is history. We can never go back to what it was like, and we can attempt, but it's never going to be exactly the same because technology is always moving us forward. Conversations, relationships, things are changing, and there's always something new in the space that affects how we operate. And so things are never going to be that way. Now, that said, if something, God forbid, catastrophic happens and we lose the majority of the technology that we have in the way that we know it, yeah, we're going to be forced to communicate and connect in a certain way again, but that still is going to come based on the knowledge or the experiences of what we used to do. People will still miss cell phones. People will still miss whatever it is. And so our communication will differ. But, in a world where things still progress, in a world where technology is still developing, we will have pockets where we will have better communication in certain areas or certain communities. But now it's really about us figuring out what it is that we want. What is the result that we're after? And then just being intentional with the technologies that we have and the communities and the experiences that we have to create. For example, something as simple as if you're a family and you've got maybe a nuclear family that consists of, parents and children. What is your intention? So in our household, we've had this thing for a long time at the dinner table. When we sit down to eat dinner together, no cell phones. We don't bring those. If you bring it, somebody points it out, hey, no technology at the table type thing, right? So we've got to be intentional about creating what are the parameters for our communities, because they're not going to develop by accident.
Mhm. Would you call that parameter an expectation for your family or maybe a rule for your family?
I don't know if I would say it is a rule. I think it's something that we created and discussed
Mm,
together. It wasn't like mom or dad was like, do this, and everybody else is like, okay. No, these are things that we kind of have created, and we talk about why, and we talk about what we want, and then based on what we want, we come up with some things, ground rules, if you want to call it, to fit that.
mm,
Um, but there are times where it's like, yeah, we're doing something and it calls for taking out the phone. It
mm,
calls for texting somebody. Or during this pandemic where we had Thanksgiving at home and we couldn't be at our parents' house, we FaceTimed everybody. And so there were some people, there was like 4 iPads around the table while while we're eating, they're eating. And so, you adjust based on the results that you're after in that moment. But the biggest thing that you do inside of that is not just be rigid and concrete, but
mm.
be flexible enough to have discussions about what it is that you're looking to create and what's the result that you and the community are after.
Mhm. Yeah, and you said it, adjusting and being flexible.
Yeah.
Because if you can do that, then that is communication where you're listening to someone. Okay, well, tell me what's going on, right? We're not going to be rigid because if we do that, then we're just following what I believe my ideals. There's no phones at the table. I don't care what happens, right? Well, quarantine happens, lockdown happened. We want to still keep that family type of community. So how do we do that? And
Right.
then we get the iPads and we bring it into the kitchen space where there's no technology. But in that time, yes, there is technology because we are still being able to communicate rather than be on them and be distracted.
Right.
And I think there's just so many distractions now for people that they don't necessarily need or they don't even see an opportunity to communicate. And I have many parents coming to me and they say, "Hey, Michael, I'm trying to repair the relationship with my child." And then I asked them, I was like, "Well, why is it broken?" And then they say, "Well, I'm always working, and whenever we're home, they're always on their phone or they're doing something." And then so we just look at the areas of their day because everyone has a different day. Sometimes they're able to eat dinner, sometimes they're able to eat breakfast, depending on
Right.
when they're available, right? So we just create pockets where they can communicate, and it could be in the car, driving from home to school, from school to home, depending on what is happening in their life. And we just start small. We don't just say, okay, no phones in the home and you guys just have to communicate 24/7. No, no, no. Let's start
Right.
small, right? Just bring that communication to them some way where they can have 5 or 10 minutes talking to you uninterrupted. And then eventually they're going to get used to that. And then they might ask, "Hey, dad, maybe we can go out Saturday." Right. And then now you're spending a Saturday with them. And most likely, if you're going to the arcade or if you're going to the amusement park, yeah, there might be some cell phones there, but it's not going to be where it's like I'm primarily on my cell phone watching TikTok videos. So it goes beyond what many people think that, okay, the cell phone is taking my kid away from me. No, no, no. You have to understand that your kid is doing what you allowed them to do. Technology is not a bad thing. I'm not here to bash technology. I love technology. Technology has united you and I on this podcast where
Absolutely.
I was able to reach out to you and then to have you come on and then ignite my audience with your energy and with your wisdom. And I appreciate that, number one. But number two, other people can now experience, hey, I'm having this conversation too. I'm listening to this conversation through technology. So technology is not one of those things that are going to be a crutch in society. Is how we use it.
Yeah.
Technology can be a good thing. It's the same thing with tools. Tools can be a good thing or they can be a bad thing. It depends on the user.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just backing up for just a second, I think if I think about conversations that I've had with my kids. Teenagers are very different than 30 or 40-year old, right? And then one of the traps that some grown-ups or parents fall into is they're like, okay, I've got to reclaim or I've got to recapture a relationship with my kid. And so they're like, okay, let me bombard them with a bunch of questions now. And so they bombard them, and then the kid doesn't really want to answer all of that. They're like, you don't really talk to me all the time. Why are you expecting me to answer 10 questions now when you've only spoken to me one time in the last month or the last 2 months? Right. And so I want to encourage parents, if you are looking at rebuilding relationships with your children, I think you said this phrase as well, take it a little bit at a time. If you're in a car with them and you ask a question about something and they give you a 30-second answer, cool. Grab that. Be grateful for that. Right. And then the next time, shoot for 45 seconds. Maybe you prepare two questions instead of, 10, and if they give you 45 seconds, cool. And then you shoot for a minute after that. So it's step by step. It's step by step. And communication, especially broken communication and broken trust and broken relationships, are not rebuilt in a moment. It's rebuilt over time. And so give yourself some time, give your kids some grace, and be consistent with the work.
Yeah. And then understanding child development too.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on this, where it's like, understand that they're not kids anymore. Kids are going to be different, right? When they're 3, 4 years old, they're going to run to you, mommy, daddy, and they want to give you a hug. When they're 7 or 8, they might leave me alone. And then it kind of just ramps up a little bit in the teen years. And then it kind of simmers down. When they're adults, they will go give you a hug or a kiss or whatever. But we do have to understand that as they're growing up, now their subconscious mind is going to be formed. Now they're thinking for themselves. And they are going to be emotional also. So there's going to be times when they're just trying to figure things out and causes a lot of emotion for them. And they're trying to deal with that. And the last thing they need is 99 questions from you. We do have to understand that they are in a different space than we are. And we do have to kind of put ourselves in their shoes, that we were in that space at once also. I remember when I was 15, I was a jerk. So I know my son, when he's 15, he's going to be a jerk, and I'm just going to welcome it. And I'm going to say, yeah, that was me. That was me. He is my son. He's following in my footsteps. I am proud of this boy. But it's more so if we understand that kids are going to be kids, but at the same time, we have an expectation for the family, where it's like family is going to be family, regardless of if you're mad at me or if I'm upset with you, if you do something wrong. Family has your back regardless. And like, I'm just thinking of all the phrases that I have been told throughout my whole life from my father, from my mother. And it's just those little quick sayings like, good job, I got your back, handle your business. Like those little things, like those little sayings that they have told me stick with me all the way to adulthood. So your kids are listening. They are listening. And though they might not have a full-blown conversation with you, the way you communicate with them, even if it's just one phrase, they're going to remember that for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. They're definitely listening. My dad would always say to me, more is caught than taught. And so, consistently sharing, but also being introspective and looking back at yourself and what you're putting out into the world. Because sometimes the reason that kids may not listen or may not be willing to engage is because you're throwing information at them, but the way that you're living doesn't line up with the information that you're trying to share or your expectations of them. So be willing to look back at those other four fingers that are pointing back at you. Be willing to be introspective as well as you're looking to rebuild and have these conversations.
Exactly. And I love what we spoke about today. It's more than just confidence. It's more than just communication. It's basically a lifestyle where the way we act, the way we speak to other people, it tells us so much more about us than it does other people. Because if we can be open to learning, open to listening, then we understand ourselves a little bit deeper too. Oh, wait, when someone says this, I get agitated. Or if someone did this, I don't want to talk to them anymore, right? Why is that? And then you can do some introspection of, all right, is it really appropriate for me just to end a relationship because someone did this, someone said this, or they believe this, right? It's more than that, right? And what we spoke about today is basically the basics of communication. And, Robert said it the best, listening, right? Get to listening to your family members, your friends, your coworkers, everyone, and become an effective listener. And that's going to help with your communication. So if I can from you, Robert, any last words, and then please tell people where they can find you.
Love it, man. I think the biggest thing that I like to share at the end of any interviews or podcast episodes is that a lot of us feel like our stories are not worth telling. We hold things inside and we don't connect, we don't communicate because we feel very isolated. But I just like going to the gym, I like to say that the experiences that happen to us are meant to help us grow stronger. The way that we navigate those experiences really is a testament and a testimony to others. And people are looking, believe it or not, people are looking at you and looking at how you go through pain, how you go through struggle, how you go through challenge, how you go through joy, how you go through excitement, how you go through great experiences. They're looking at all of that. And that collective, that collaborative, that collection of experiences is your story. And so I like to end my episodes by saying everything that happens to you in life is your stuff is your story, and your story deserves a stage. So get on out there and tell it.
Mm-hmm. And communication is good to be, what's it, 70 or 80% nonverbal or something like that. So it's a
Yeah.
it's a good percentage of communication that's not going to be just spoken language, where
Right.
we see how people are. Are they looking at the ground? Are they happy? Are they sad? Getting that emotional type of intelligence requires some type of skill. And I know working with Robert is going to be a good starting point for you to get that emotional intelligence. So you might think that, okay, he's going to help me with my kid, but he's going to actually teach you to pay attention. Pay attention to your kid, pay attention to your family members or to your peers, and then get a good understanding of where they are and where you would like to be. So everyone, thank you for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Kennedy III. I would like to thank my guest again, Robert Kennedy III, for coming on Coaching in Session, for sharing some of his wisdom and what he does as a communications coach. What we are looking for here in communication is for people to understand that people are going to be people, and there might be different viewpoints and beliefs and values, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're all against each other. Right now, I'm working on a bipartisan deal. Now, this is politics, but you have to understand that there's going to be two different parties. And sometimes when we talk about politics, people can't be cordial. Even if it's bipartisan, there's going to be people who are going to have a belief about it, an adamant belief about it, and they might not like what we're talking about or what we're doing. Well, guess what? Communication is going to be dealing with some of the things that maybe you don't like, because people are going to live their life the way they want to live their life. And just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that they can't live how they want. Being open, being able to listen and to communicate effectively is a skill that many of us need to work on a consistent basis. Even myself, I have to practice to be a good listener, to not be the person to speak first when I get into a room, because I have employees, and of course I can go into a Zoom call and say, okay, everyone, tell me what I need to know and then see you later. No, it's conversation. They're people. And so I want to get to know, well, how was their week? Is there anything that I can do to make the job better? And that type of communication not only keeps retention high, but it also allows that person to tell me about things that they might not want to tell me. They might say, yes, the emails are not going the way we thought, and maybe they think I'm going to react a certain way, so they don't tell me. I mean, I would rather be told bad news than no news. So yes, how you communicate with others is going to almost determine how they communicate with you. Because if you're going to be someone who's difficult to talk to, they're probably not going to talk to you. So if you want people to talk to you, if you want people to, of course, come into a space with you that they can be open and have a conversation with you, that's a skill that you have to learn. So check out all of the links for Robert Kennedy III. They're in the description box below. And if you're interested in mindset coaching, head over to revenconcepts.com and we can get you all the help that you need. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me coachinginsession@gmail.com, and I will see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone, take care.